this video continues from the previous. Okay, so look at, sorry, it's setting off my, there we go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Now it's not on the page correctly. And I'm not quite sure what this box is back here. Anyway. So look at the answer. Oh, look at the, there's something missing. Look at the work and answer each of the art criticism questions. Look at the following. See, this is me. This is me in a video on constructive criticism, constructively criticizing myself. Because I read that and I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. All right, so look at the following work and answer each of the art criticism questions, right? We're going to answer, what elements do I see? How are the elements and principles of design used? Or how are the principles used to, how are the principles applied to the elements? And then we're going to try to figure out, what is the artist or designer trying to communicate? And then finally, is this a successful work of art? And I don't think we did that back with Matisse about whether or not it was a successful work of art. But when I used to teach that live in the classroom, everyone agreed it was successful because he had applied the principles and elements of design appropriately to create a successful work of art. And it doesn't matter if you like it or not. It has nothing to do with the subjective. It was a pure objective analysis. And that's where we want to remain. Okay, so Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. Again, what elements do you see? And I'm not going to tell you the answer. I want you guys to do this. I want you to go through this, and I want you to use the principles and elements of design that we've learned so far. Just cut what we've briefly covered so far. Do the best that you can, and do this yourselves to practice. How were the elements and principles of design used? How did Frank Lloyd Wright take those elements of design that you've just identified, and how did he arrange them? What is he trying to communicate? Again, what do you see? Keep going back to that. Look at what you actually see, not what you think you see. Make sure you really look at it. One of the reasons for this exercise is to make sure that you see what's there and not what you think you see. That's one reason most people cannot draw. They try to draw what they think they see instead of what they actually see. And I'm going to teach you guys how to draw. I think I've mentioned I have an AFA, so I can teach anybody how to draw. And now, assessment. Is this a successful work of art? So you're going to take all the information you've gathered. Is this a successful work of art? And this is where then the constructive criticism flows. If it's not, what would make it? And that is the feedback you give. Now, he's a famous architect, and this is a famous work of residential design, and it's beloved and well known, and it's beautiful, and no one's going to argue. Obviously, no one's going to say, no, this isn't successful. Because it's successful, but I'll tell you where it's a failure. He dropped out of architecture school. There's a book called The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and most architecture students read it while they're in architecture school because, you know, it's this legend about how she knew and maybe had an affair with Frank Lloyd Wright, but that the novel she wrote, she was at least friends with him and enamored with him. And he was a bit of a celebrity at the time that he was around. He would hang out with the jet set and other celebrities, and he would invite them to his house and have parties with them. And so he was known. And so he was involved with her, or met her in some capacity. And it's no secret that, or it's I would say it's inferred that she wrote about him, that he was the character in her, he was the protagonist in her book, and Howard Rourke. And so, yeah, I read that book trying to remember what year I read that book, 30 years ago, and I still remember the book. So if you decide you want to understand the references that people make to the Fountainhead, read it. It's a very long book, but it'll be very eye opening. And so I actually totally got off where I was going with this. Oh, there's a lot of stories out there about him. So he's more known about, there's more information out there about him, and there are museums. There's one in Wisconsin, Spring Green, his home residence, and you can take a tour. It's absolutely beautiful up there. His work's still around, and they've become museums because the work is so good. So of course they tell you things about him. So that's why there's a lot out there about him that's not necessarily known about every designer. So anyway, so he dropped out of architecture school, and the Fountainhead, that's where I got off track. The Fountainhead kind of explains why. And I don't know if that's true or not, but it would fit. So he dropped out of architecture school, and he had designed this residence, because back then, and to some degree today, you don't need to go to school to be a designer. The technology is getting to where it's unavoidable. It's a whole lot harder to do an internship than it is to get a degree. In California, you can sit for the registration exam without any degree, but you have to have like 15 years of experience to qualify, as opposed to having a degree and less experience. So he designed this, and he actually was studying, I'm trying to remember the details. It's been a while since I've heard this, but he was studying structural engineering. Dropped out of that too. And he designed this, and in his working drawings, his documents that were being used to build it, he didn't put enough rebar in the foundation. And the contractor who was building it said, "You don't have enough rebar in your foundation." And Frank Lloyd Wright, being the egotist that he is, argued with the guy, and the contractor put in more rebar anyway. Nonetheless, the foundation in this house is cracked. He doubled the amount of rebar. Even with the additional rebar, it's still cracked. So had the contractor followed Frank Lloyd Wright's design as it was created, this would no longer be with us. It would have fallen into the water. And so that's why I'm using this specifically, this residence, as an example of why constructive criticism is a good thing. Because the contractor gave him feedback. He looked at the the construction documents, in a different way than we do with art. And we're going to get into that too. It's going to take a couple more classes before you guys will be able to give that kind of feedback. But the contractor gave him feedback, and he decided to just dismiss it when he shouldn't have. But fortunately, the contractor went behind his back, put the extra rebar in there, and we now can enjoy this beautiful, it's a museum now, this beautiful example of residential architecture. It's beautiful. He's one of my favorite. I would say, I know it's cliche. I know everybody loves Frank Lloyd Wright, but there's a reason everybody loves Frank Lloyd Wright. And once you go inside one of his houses, it's to me, it's just this magical experience. He's just his ability to design is just incredible. So I'm a huge fan of his. You're gonna find people that hate him, but. Okay, so now you're going to apply these techniques to evaluating your own work. It will make your work stronger. It will make you a better designer, and it will help you in your career. Because the less time you spend, or the more time you spend evaluating your own work, the less time you'll spend fixing mistakes later. So when you critique your own work, you will quickly see an improvement in your work, which will ultimately lead to an improvement in your grades. Ultimately, it will lead to an improvement in your work that you put out to your clients. And their AIBD puts out a annual competition, and there are designers who win awards for their work. And you can bet that those people have plenty of clients. So when asked to describe your work in future courses, you will be able to do this effectively if you follow this method that I've described in this lecture series. At the end of the day, don't let compliments get to your head, and don't let criticism get to your heart. And that's the best advice, right? So people are going to give you compliments and people are going to give you criticism, and don't let either one of them impact who you are. Be you. And honestly, you're going to get compliments and negative criticism from different people for the same work. I promise. And so just see it for what it is. It's just people who have opinions. Now that you know the process for genuine, legitimate feedback, you'll know that when people say, well, I don't like that, it's not based on anything. It's not I don't own that. They really didn't process this. They're just being difficult. So let's start practicing this. We're going to practice this, and you'll get really good at it, and it will help you, and it's a positive thing. Okay? So I'm going to conclude this lecture series here on constructive analysis, and we'll move on to the next.